We have our form now, and user is going to be filling these fields. Let's make sure this button is enabled after user enters same value for password and the password repeat fields. Currently it is disabled. Initially it is disabled, and after user enters same value, the button will be enabled. So let's add a test about it. So we have this describe block for the layout. Now we are going to have the interactions with these elements. So I'm just choosing this way to go with. I'm adding a new describe block right here. This is a new test suites, and this is for interactions. And we are adding our first test, and this one is it enables the button when password and password repeat fields have same value. And let's implement our test. So we are going to render sign up page, and we are going to type values into the password and password repeat field. So let's get them. I'm going to just use the query I've used in previous tests. So we get the password field by get by label text password, and let's change this one to password input, and we will get the password repeat input, and let's change the variable name repeat input. Now we are going to type something into these inputs, and for that we have another package installed in the project. So here in the package.json, here we can see there is this user event, and we are going to use this user event. First, let's import that one. Let's import user event from testing library user-event. Now we are going to use this user event, and let's use its functionality. It has the functionalities like type, click, double click, and the other user actions we can do on page. So in this one we will call type, and we will be typing to the password input element, and we are going to type this text. Let's say we type just this one, password, and we will repeat same thing on password repeat input. So we are entering same value to both of these inputs, and in the end we are going to check if button is enabled. So again, copying the query of the button from previous test, we are getting the button, and in this one we expect this button to be enabled. By the way, the matcher has the not version, so we can do like this: expect not to be disabled, or we can just go with to be enabled. So saving this one. So this is failing. We have seen it's failing on browser too. So whatever we type here, it doesn't have any effect on the button yet. Now let's fix this. First thing we need is we need to get the values of these inputs and compare them. Then based on the result, we will set for this button to be either disabled or enabled. The first thing we can do at this point is to make sure we are dynamically able to set the disabled attribute for the sign up button. For now, let's practice that, then we will implement the fix. So here in this render, let's have a variable. Let's say this is disabled, and initially let's say it is true. Now we can use this variable for this attribute in the button. So we can say this disabled is equals to, we are opening the curly braces and referring to the variable we have here. So if I save this, this is not going to be fixing our test, but we will see how it is changing the behavior of the button. So let's save this one. So the button is disabled, but if I change this one to false, now we can see button is enabled. So we can use a variable in an attribute value like this, but in each change we do right here in the code base, after saving this one, it is causing application to reload. So the change we are doing right here is having an effect. But how we can update this one in the runtime? So let's try like this. Let's change this variable to let, because we are going to change it now. And let's have a timeout function. So let's call set timeout of JavaScript. And let's say this is going to be run after 1 second. And we will be setting disabled to true. And let's print a log right here, updating disabled. Saving this one. Now after 1 second, this disabled will be set to true. So we expect this sign up button to be disabled, but we see no change here. But if we check the console, here we are seeing updating disabled is printed. So this code is actually working. This disabled is changed from false to true, but it is not causing this layout to be re-rendered. React component is re-rendered when its internal state is changed. This disabled variable we have here is keeping a state, but it's not something React aware of. So instead of having this one, we are going to use state functionality coming with React. React has two different component types. In this one we have this class component and it has state definition. Other component type is functional, and they used to be called as stateless components, but after React 16.8, hooks functionality is introduced, and then the functional components will be able to keep internal states also. But let's go with a class component right here, and let's have a state in it. So basically this class has this state field, and it is just a JSON, and in this one we will have this disabled, and initially it's going to be true. Now we are not going to use this one, and here in the set timeout we are going to update this state. We update the state by calling this component is having a function. This component has the function of set state, and in set state we can pass the state object. So we can say the state will be, this is the object, and in disabled field we want it to be false. So we don't need this part. Let's keep the console log. By the way, in render we shouldn't be changing the state of our application, because each state change is triggering component to re-render, and if our render function is keeping state changes, then it can go into an infinite loop and can break our application. So we have this state variable disabled, and we are updating here, and now in this button we can refer to the state disabled property by calling this .state.disabled. So let's save this one. Here the button disabled, and after 1 second the button is enabled. And if we check the console logs, by the way, let's not focus to this part. Here it is saying updating disabled, and here the problem is visible. The log is printed thousands of times because the state is updated. It is causing re-render, and the render is again making another set timeout, and it is triggering this state change. So it goes on and on. So let's comment out this part to not cause any problem in the application. By the way, your app may be stuck at this point. Here we can see the logs are still printed because there are tons of set timeout being called right here, and you can just resolve it by reloading this application. You may need to close the window and open a new one, or just hit the reload and wait the browser to resolve the issue. So as soon as we update this state's disabled value, the component is re-rendered, and here in the button disabled attribute is rendered with the latest state value. Now let's fix our actual test. Now we have to listen the changes coming from this password and password repeat inputs. User will be typing values into it, and we are going to listen the changes in those inputs, and we will take the values from those inputs. And we can do it like this. Let's clear this part, and let's have a function right here. This is this class function. Let's say this is onChangePassword. This function will be called whenever anything changed on the password input. The name we are setting here is up to us. So I choose this name, onChangePassword, and this function will be called from this input, the input for the password, and we associate this function with this input by setting it like this. It has this onChange attribute, and basically we are just passing this onChangePassword to it. So the React is allowing us to set event listener for HTML elements, and here in this page we can get the list of supported events. So here we have the events like this one. We are using this onChange at the moment, and there is this onInput, or the mouse events like the click, drag, mouse over, and so on. So whenever anything changed on this input, it's going to be calling this onChangePassword, and when it is calling this function, it is going to be passing the actual event object, and from this object we can access to the target. Target is referring to the input element, and input element is containing that text in the value attribute of it. So we can get, let's say this is current value from event target value. Then what we can do is we can call this set state, and we can set the value of this password input into this state, and we can update this disabled. We don't have to initially define the state variables. We can add new ones while calling this set state. So we don't have the password, but we can say this password in state will be current value. And also we will have password repeat. So basically the state will have password, let's say initially it's going to be empty, and password repeat, again it's going to be empty. Then in this set state we are passing an object saying there is password, and it's going to be current value because we are listening to password changes in this function. And also let's make sure disabled will be comparison of current value against the password repeat value in our state. So if current value is not equal to this state password repeat, then this is going to be true, which means the button will be disabled. But if they are equal, then this is going to be false and button will be enabled. So this is for the password. Let's repeat the same thing for password repeat. So this one is going to take the current value, and this is going to be updating the password repeat field in the state. And in this one we are going to compare the current value, which is for the password repeat, against the value in state for the password. And last thing is we are going to call this function in this input for the password repeat. So we said onChange this onChangePassword repeat. Again, we don't need to specify the fields in the state if we don't need them initially. So we can add them while setting a state value like this. I just added here to make it more easy to understand how come we are able to use this state password repeat right here. If the state doesn't have this value, it's going to be undefined, so the current value will not be equal to that value, so this expression will still work for us. And that's it. Let's save this one. Now the test is passing, and we can confirm this one right here. Let's type anything to this password and typing same thing to password repeat, and here we can see the sign up is enabled. And if we open the components in DevTools right here, we have this state variables. Let's refresh this page. Let's check the sign up once again. Currently we have only this disabled, which is defined right here. But if we type anything here we can see there is this password in the state now, and it has this value. And if we type anything to the password repeat, and it's also right here, and since both having the same value, this disabled is false. But if I type anything else, here we can see it is turned to true, and as this value changes, we are seeing effect on the button. So we can use this tool to change the value like this, so we can just toggle between true false to make the button disabled or enabled. Now let's refactor this implementation. We don't need this disabled in the state anymore, since after changing these inputs, they are going to be updating state with the password and the password repeat values, and this is going to be causing this render to be called once again. And instead of doing this check right here in these functions, we can compare the password and password repeat right here in this render. So initially, let's say the disabled will be true, and we will get the values from state, password, and password repeat. We can use object destructuring. So this state has password and password repeat. So we can take them like this, and we can compare them. In our application, initially, these two is empty or undefined. Since both are having same value, either empty or undefined, they will be equal, so it's going to be breaking our previous test. It disables the button initially. So at the step where user has no entry in this form, the button must be disabled. So we must be checking if the password and the password repeat has value in them. So we can do it like this. If password, in JavaScript we can use the variables for expressions, because the variables has the value of either truthy or falsy. And since this password and password repeat are text values, if they have any value other than the empty, then they will be considered as true. Otherwise, it is going to be false. So if there is value for a password, if password is true and password repeat is true, then we can compare them. And we can say this disabled is if password is not equal to password repeat. So if it's not equal, then this disabled will be true. And instead of using state disabled, we can just use this disabled, and we can get rid of this disabled from here, and also removing this one and this one as well. Now if we save this, the tests are still passing, and if we test it right here, we can see the functionality is properly working. We can keep the state like this with empty object, or to have the visual reference about what is the state containing, you can just add the fields. So we will have password, and initially it's going to be empty, and we will have password repeat, which is also going to be empty.